session of Catalyst of Change, a series that celebrates leaders whose work is helping advance equity and inclusion in science and in transformation of global food systems. At CIMMYT, we believe that the most powerful science is science that serves people, science that listens, collaborates, and reflects the diversity of the communities it seeks to support. Therefore, today, food systems are at the center of some of the most important challenges facing our world. Climate change, rising food demands, and growing inequalities are placing increasing pressure on farmers and rural communities. We're seeing that on the news every day. And as many global discussions have now highlighted in the recent years, but even in the recent days, that food systems are not only about production and nutrition, they're also deeply connected to our economic stability, social resilience, and the well-being of societies. Addressing these challenges requires not only scientific excellence, but also inclusive thinking that brings together different disciplines, perspectives, and lived experiences. That's exactly the spirit behind today's conversation. We are therefore honored to welcome Professor Madhura Swaminathan, a distinguished economist and an internationally recognized expert on food security, agriculture, and rural development. Professor Swaminathan has spent more than 3 decades advancing research and policy dialogues and issues that lie at the heart of food systems. Access to food, rural livelihoods, and the structural inequalities that shape who benefits from development and who is left behind. She has authored numerous influential books and publications and has served on important advisory bodies in India and internationally. Today, she serves as the vice chairperson of the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition of the FAO, contributing to global policy discussions on how to build more equitable and resilient food systems. Her work reminds us that achieving food security is not only about producing more food, but also about ensuring that food systems are inclusive, fair, and responsive to the needs of farmers and their communities. Joining her in this conversation is Dr. Velu Govindan, principal scientist and wheat breeder at CERT. Over the past 17 years, Velu has played a key role in advancing wheat breeding, especially around zinc-improved wheat innovations that help address some of the most pressing challenges in agriculture. His work focuses on accelerating genetic gains through modern breeding approaches, including genomic selection, high-throughput phenotyping, and biofortification. Through these efforts, he has contributed to the development of climate-resilient and zinc-enriched wheat varieties that are helping to improve nutrition and strengthening the livelihoods of smallholder farmers across South Asia, Africa, and other wheat-growing regions. Equally important, Velu's work is closely engaged with national partners, and it strengthens breeding capacity and the support for the next generation of scientists, a commitment that reflects the collaborative spirit that is at heart of CIMMYT's through and through mission. Together, the perspectives of Dr. Swaminathan and Dr. Govindan highlight something essential. Transforming food systems requires both scientific innovation, but especially inclusive thinking. At CIMMYT, that is central to what we do every day, advancing science that improves the livelihood of smallholder farmers while strengthening resilient and sustainable food systems worldwide. With this, I invite you all to join this conversation, learn more from the insights of our distinguished speakers, and continue especially working together to ensure that science remains a powerful force for equity, opportunity, and positive change. Thank you very much once again for being part of Catalyst of Change, and Professor Swaminathan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bram, and thank you to CIMMYT. It's an honor to be part of this conversation. CIMMYT is a word that I knew before I knew what it stood for or the meaning of CIMMYT. And that is because growing up as a young girl in the campus of the Indian Agricultural Research Institute in Pusa, where my father, with many other scientists from India, worked with Norman Borlaug, CIMMYT scientists, Mexican scientists, and they were working, we found out later, at least I found out later, on the dwarf varieties, high-yielding varieties of wheat, which of course resulted in the Green Revolution. So I think this is really nice to be back at CIMMYT in a way, to be participating in a CIMMYT event. although I grew up on the an agricultural university campus, I never imagined or I never thought I was going to be a researcher in agricultural and development economics. But that is where I have turned up, and that's where I've spent most of my career. And I want to today just tell you a few stories about how and where, some not quite turning points, but some lessons that I have learned, some experiences that have shaped my thinking. So I want to start with the first one is I was a pretty straightforward student. I did science at school, and then I shifted to economics. I did my undergraduate degree. I was going towards a graduate degree. So nothing very out of the ordinary. But in the summer of 1981, that was when I was a master's student, I managed to get a small research grant to do a summer project. And that was very rare in those days to get any money in India to go and do a summer project. But I had chosen to study the cost of fuel. And because we had been studying something about energy prices. And I went to the Gadwal Himalayas, the central Himalayas. And I went to study the cost of fuel use and the extent of fuel use for cooking in a mountain village, which was not connected by road the last few kilometers when I had to walk to the village. And what I learned there, which was not there in any textbook of ours about energy, was that the main source of fuel was, of course, firewood. But more importantly, firewood was not bought from the market. Firewood was collected by women. They walked a couple of kilometers to the nearby forest, and then they either picked up twigs and branches that had fallen or cut some twigs and branches and carried back quite a heavy load on a mountain path back to their homes. So this idea that the cost of fuel was actually the time of women, the drudgery of women, was something very new to me. And I realized that there are a lot of things which are not there in our textbooks. Today we know about some of these things, but in the 1980s, there was nothing of this kind in what we were reading and what we were learning in class. And this was perhaps, I could say, one of the first time use surveys in India. Of course, now time use survey as a method of understanding women's work is something that is widely understood and widely used throughout the world. A second example that I want to give is, some years later, I went to Oxford as a Rhodes Scholar and started doing an MPhil degree. And again, although I thought I was going to have a career in academics and I wanted to do a PhD, I also felt I wanted to have some experience of the field, of the ground. And I was based then, I went to Madurai and I was based in a research project at the Agricultural College in Madurai in South India in Tamil Nadu, which is now part of the, even then was part of the Tamil Nadu Agricultural University. And that was another eye-opener in the sense that I was born and brought up in Delhi. I was an urban person. And to go and live in these two villages, to learn about the complexity of rural life, and to become aware of the different axes of deprivation and disadvantage, and in particular, what we still talk about today in India, the axes of class, caste, and gender. And I guess in other parts of the world, it could be race or ethnicity. In India, it's very much caste. Now, this has actually, I think, this experience shaped my way of thinking a lot about economics and development economics. And even till today, over the years, I have continued with colleagues, with students, young scholars, working with a small organization called the Foundation for Agrarian Studies. I have continued to engage in studying villages in different parts of India. And the Foundation for Agrarian Studies has studied about 28 villages in 12 states of India. Now, 28 villages is very small. You may ask, what do we learn from them? But I think what we learn is about what the Director General mentioned, how inequalities actually play out on the ground in real life. And let me take an example here from a study that was done in Tamil Nadu again in 2019, just before COVID. So it's a very recent study. I'm talking about very contemporary period, not about the 1980s or earlier. And we studied 2 villages in depth, and some of the young scholars who worked on this project wrote a paper showing that farm business incomes were different, statistically significantly different, as between scheduled caste farmers and non-scheduled caste farmers. For those of you not familiar with India, our oppressed castes are identified in the constitution as scheduled castes. People of this caste have been at the bottom of the caste hierarchy and deprived and discriminated against in many ways for centuries. So even today, in 2020, in terms of farm incomes, in terms of gross value of output, in terms of costs of cultivation, and in terms of net farm incomes, we were very surprised, at least I was surprised, that you find a clear difference between scheduled castes and others. And I as far as I'm aware, in the research that is coming out of the NARS, the Indian Agricultural Research System, or even the International Agricultural Research Institutes working on India, there's talk about small farmers, there's talk about women farmers, but I haven't seen the question of caste discussed. And as I said, these 3 are linked, but these are different forms of exclusion. And if you ask me, why is it that scheduled caste farmers had a net income per hectare that was lower than others? Not only because of size, not only because of size of holding, but because traditionally they have been landless, so many of them lease land, they had to pay rent. They are resource-poor farmers. They didn't own the tractors or the or other machines. They had to hire in the machines from others. So in different ways, the costs were higher and the returns were lower. So I think these are the things that I'm not saying this is something that is generalizable over India, but I think this is something that opens our eyes to the ways in which different kinds of exclusion can affect farmers, small farmers, women farmers, scheduled caste farmers. The last example I want to give is on the issue of food security, which I have been studying for a long time. But my interest in this began in the mid-1990s. As you know, in 1991, we had these policies of economic liberalization, of trade liberalization, of financial liberalization. And one of the objectives of those policies, and one of the recommendations that came from the World Bank and other institutions, and also from Indian economists, was to reduce the fiscal expenditure, to reduce by reducing food subsidies. And the specific recommendation was to shift from a universal system of consumer food subsidies, what we call in India the public distribution system, a system whereby rations are given to all eligible households in the country. This started during wartime, but has continued and diversified in different ways, and was a kind of backbone of food security in India. And in 1996, it was decided that this should become narrowly targeted. and different criteria for targeting those below the poverty line, and other criteria were mentioned. Now, this discussion and debate became a very important public debate in India, as I think in many other countries. I know that in Mexico, in Brazil, in many countries, there has been this debate about whether food subsidies should be universal or targeted, whether food subsidies should be in cash or in kind, because the Indian system was in kind. And one of the recommendations was to shift to cash transfer, so then we didn't have to procure grain and store it and transport it and deliver it. And another was about conditionality and whether transfers should be unconditional or they should be conditional on behavior, poor people's behavior. So this was a very important debate, and I became a participant in this as an academic, researching it, but also writing about it in the public, in the media, and very importantly, engaging with the women's movement in India, in particular, the largest women's organization, rural women's organization in India, which is called the Janavadi Mahila Sanghatna in Hindi, or All India Democratic Women's Association, who led the struggle at the grassroots for a youth system of universal food security. And I think it shouldn't surprise us that in many parts of the world, including India, women are responsible for ensuring there is food on the table. It's women who are largely engaged in cooking, with a few exceptions. When food prices rise, when food is not available, it's women who have to decide what to cook, who should get what. And very often it's women who eat the last after children are fed, after the men are fed. So this question of rising food prices, of reduction in food subsidies and its implication for the household food budget was something that women were agitated about. And the women's movement in different parts of India, led by several organizations, but notably by AIDWA, for about 12 years, from 2000 to 2012, and that's a very significant year, I'll come to that in a minute, were at the forefront of the struggles to actually change the system of food subsidies in India, to ensure that the targeted PDS became universal, so to expand the scope of food security, not only in terms of universal coverage, but to improve the quality, the quantity, and the diversity of food distributed through the PDS. And these women's organizations in different, they're in almost in every state of the country, led protests, marched on the streets, but they also sent petitions, they sent letters to ministers, to the chief ministers, to parliament, to legislators. They organized seminars and conferences. And in these seminars and conferences, and some of which I participated in, I was lucky to participate in, we actually discussed policy questions. It was a site for discussion and debate on the implications of different policies at the grassroots level. And I think, in my view, this consistent and continuing mobilization by women, by women's organizations, was one of the important what should I say, catalysts of the National Food Security Act. The Indian government, the Indian legislature passed the National Food Security Act in 2013, which was quite unique in the sense that it provided the right to food. So access to food or food subsidy was not just to be seen as a welfare handout, but it affirmed the right to food. More importantly, although it was not universal, it was near universal. 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population were made eligible. In other words, about 2/3 of the Indian population. India has a population of 1.4 billion people today. So that means almost a billion people, 1,000 million people were made eligible. So this was, I think, quite a landmark legislation. The Supreme Court, the legal system played a big role, NGOs played a role, the legislators played a role, but women's voices also played a role. And the lesson I took away from this and that I want to share today is the importance of collectives, whether it's farmers' organizations, women's groups, cooperatives, self-help groups. I think through these collectives, those who are excluded can find a voice, can actually participate in public debate, and what Amartya Sen has called public action from below. So I'll just read out this quote from Amartya Sen and Jean Drèze in their book, Hunger and Public Action. And they write, public action is not just a question of public delivery and state initiative. It is also, in a big way, a matter of participation by the public in the process of social change. Public action can have so this is public action from below, public action from citizens, from academics, from researchers, from women's organizations, from trade unions, so journalists. So I think this experience was very important in showing that there are some people who are in government, who are advisors, who are policymakers, who are ministers. They make public action from above. But many of us who are independent scholars or researchers can also participate in forming public opinion and in public action from below. I would now, before we turn to the question and answer, I don't want to go into my career, but I think I want to say one thing, and that is that I hope I have mentored some young people. I didn't have a single mentor of that kind, though I was inspired by many of the women leaders and activists who I met. But I would like to say that my father and my husband have been very, very important in my work and career in terms of providing a moral compass, in terms of intellectual discussion, and in terms of unstinting support in all my activities and research and career. And I think we don't always acknowledge the importance of men, and I would like to do that today. So with that, I'll stop and let Velu take the conversation forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Madhura Swaminathan. Thanks for sharing those insights. Actually, it is really thought-provoking. Especially, we are great to have you with us when we celebrate this year as International Women Farmers Year, so by the UN. So that is a great coincidence, we call. So thanks for those, I would say, case studies. So either it can be the caste-based economic revenues or the PDS system. So this is really one of the major programs India has done so well. So for the broader audience, within CIMIT, we have a set of few questions related to food security and aspects. So we have few questions for you, and then we will open the Q&A sessions to the broader audience. So to start with, so you have almost over 3 decades of your uh, research and teaching experience, in India and other countries. So what are the most pressing challenges, especially in the food system perspective, the recent geopolitical, the conflicts and other things. So what are the most pressing challenges we are facing today?
Thank you. For me, the challenge of zero hunger, the challenge of feeding the world is still the biggest challenge. But today, we don't say just feeding the world. As you know, I'm part of the high-level panel of experts, and the FAO and the UN says food security and nutrition. So it's nourishing the world. It's not just having the minimum calories at the least cost, but having a healthy diet. And the FAO comes out with an annual report, the state of food insecurity. And if you look at the latest report in 2025, they said that 2.6 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet, a diet which has the right nutrition, not just the minimum calories. So that is a huge number. And in many parts of the world, in Africa and other countries, between 2019 and 25, the number actually increased. It decreased a little in India, but I think there's some issue with Indian statistics, but I won't go into that. So I think this is the challenge. And another point I want to say briefly is that the food security now is defined in terms of 6 components: accessibility, availability, utilization or absorption, stability, so over time, sustainability, and agency. Agency is the choice. People can decide what food they want to eat. So I think that all the issues that you said, whether it is trade, whether it is war, these different components of food security are going to be severely affected. Or rather, we have to address all of them in different ways. And I think that is the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, Professor. Actually, as you rightly mentioned, for example, in the case of India, the cereal grain production, actually it is skyrocketing. In the sense, now India is the biggest rice producer and India is second largest wheat producer, and also the maize and other crops are coming. So as you rightly mentioned, it's not only the food security, but also the nutritional healthy diet. Still some of these major staples like wheat can contribute for the healthy diet. But of course, we are keep increasing the yields. That is important, especially in the climate change scenarios. But still, we can able to improve the nutrition levels of these crops, so that will have healthy diets in the communities. Yeah. So thanks for that. And also something related to women in agriculture. You have written extensively on women in agriculture aspects. So as a broader perspective, so what are the policy or research priorities or needed to support and recognize women farmers or even women scientists? So you had some experience already shared, but may some light on these also will be useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I had just written a small piece about a week ago, just after the International Women's Day and celebrating International Year of Women Farmer. I think that maybe this is my researcher's hat, but I think recognizing or counting or knowing, measuring the contribution of women is very important, because till we see them, till they are made visible, and unfortunately, many of our statistics are not still capturing women's work. And to me, that is the first step. It's a means to an end. Measuring alone is not enough, but till we recognize them. And let me give an example. The studies that we have done, and I have done my students and in the villages I mentioned, if there is a household with cattle, any form, then inevitably a woman works for at least 2 hours a day in animal rearing labor. feeding the cow, then cleaning, then milking the cow, and so on. So we have 40 million households in India that own livestock. That means, in my estimate, 40 million women are engaged in animal rearing labor, but they are not counted in any official statistic as women's contribution to livestock rearing. And at the same time, we calculated the returns from livestock, and we found that this is an example from 2 villages in Uttar Pradesh. The implicit earning from livestock income per hour of work or per day of work was about 40% of the daily wage labor of agricultural workers. In fact, so women who are engaging in this important activity, as you know, livestock is one of the fastest growing sectors in India now. Milk production has been growing rapidly, and it's women's labor which is contributing to this, but they are not recognized as workers. And because they're not recognized, the remuneration that they're getting, how much income are they earning, is also not calculated. So if we want to change that, I think we have to start with it. But in terms of other policies, I think that, in my view, increasingly as men migrate to urban areas, as they seek non-agricultural employment, more and more, even with mechanization, it is women who are working in agriculture in India, and I think other parts of the world. And so starting from land rights to access to credit, to technology, extension, in all aspects, we must look at who is it who is performing the agricultural work and with whom do we communicate. And again, a recent study by some of our young scholars showed that even in terms of access to smartphones, we're talking about AI and precision farming, there's a gender gap in access. And there's not only a gender gap in terms of, in India, mobile phone use is very high, but even then there's a big male-female difference in ownership and in digital literacy. Are you able to use the phone not for entertainment, but for actually seeking information? So I think whichever discipline you're in, what you have to start looking at agriculture, and I mean, when I say agriculture, I mean livestock or sericulture, all agricultural allied activities. You have to start looking at women participating in these activities and how best their needs can be met, how they can participate in the process.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. Actually, the women farmers' contribution is really a major significant portion of the Indian economy, I would say. It's globally. But as you said, these digital gaps, the male-female access to, that is one of the area. So I think, yeah, some of these modern tools eventually will bring more women farmers on the highlight. So another thing about the sustainability you mentioned in your discussion, that CIMMYT, we are also encouraging the more sustainable farming system, especially conservation type of agriculture and zero minimum tillage and all those things. So the more intensive agriculture, that is more currently what is happening in India, that is more productive, but it will have impact, the environmental impact over the years. So if you have some experience on how the sustainable farming practices will empower the farmers.
Yeah, I think I'm an economist. I'm not so I think CIMMYT and many institutions, you're working on different forms of new innovations, not just new seeds, but new farming practices, new ways of undertaking agriculture. So I would just like to add 2 things from here, that whatever the new technology, just to give you an example, I did a study of millet farmers, which the MS Soil and Other Research Foundation had been working with for 25 years in Kulli Hills. Why should somebody continue millet farming just because we say millet is a healthy crop and I would like to eat it? It has to be economically viable.
Yeah.
So I think to expect that the small farmer, the tenant farmer, the woman farmer, the resource poor farmer will take up certain practices because we say it is desirable, it is not going to happen. It has to be economically viable. And again, I would like to emphasize here that there are many new technologies coming on the block, and CIMIT is contributing to that as well. But do we have the institutions in place? And particularly for small farmers, women farmers, I think, how do we ensure that they can take the risks? How do we ensure that they can lower their costs, that this can become economically viable? I think this idea that I mentioned earlier of collectives, of women's groups, of cooperatives, so that we have to identify the right institutions through which the new technologies can be delivered.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, again. So lastly, you already mentioned like the international organization like CIMIT or ERI or whatever. So they have contributed to the global food security. So how do you see, placing this international organization in the new era to even strengthen the national program? It can be breeding or it can be technology. So some thoughts about that, please.
I don't think I can advise the CIMIT or the other CG institutes. But I'd like to, as I one thing I already mentioned, that you talked, the agenda of many of the CG institutes and the national institutes is now not just yield increase, but nutrition, climate change, sustainability. But I think the income or livelihood part should also be kept in the basket, because if we want it to be sustained, we have to ensure that it gives the viable income. But I want to say something else now at the last minute or so, and that is that in India, in the US, in many countries, we see a retreat from science. We see an attack on science. And I think the CG institutes, as being independent research organizations, not linked to any particular government, not linked to any particular, political arrangement, can, and I think, play a role in showing the relevance of science, in strengthening scientific temper, and I think in demonstrating what is important, and in partnership, of course, with national organizations, is demonstrating the science and the benefits of science at the field level. You've had like participatory varietal trials and all that. You know more than me about it, but we have to show that science works at the ground level. And I think otherwise, if we retreat from science, these multiple challenges, we will not be able to overcome these multiple challenges.
Yeah. So yeah, many thanks for those points, Dr. Swaminathan. So I think with that, I have completed all my questions, but now the floor is open for the broader audience. So Isabel, are you coordinating this one with the colleagues?
Yes, Dr. Balu, thank you very much for this very interesting conversation. And also, we invite the audience to submit your questions via Slido, and we invite also to raise questions. So be ready to raise your hand, open your micro and your camera. So there is one first question submitted already. It is a little bit about, again, your suggestions, Professor Swaminathan, on what do you think of the work that CIMIT does in India, and how can CIMIT be more impactful in the region? What are your suggestions?
I'm sure the Director General is not waiting for my suggestions, but I think CIMIT has in the past and in the recent past contributed in a very big way to the actual wheat varieties that are being grown in India. And I think the breeders are here, so I can't speak for that, but whether it is heat tolerant varieties or drought prone varieties, zinc fortified, fortified, we talked about nutritional challenge. So I think CIMMYT is making a contribution in partnership with the Indian institutions. And I would say that this question of demonstration, I mean, if a variety has taken off, it obviously means that it's very successful. But as we come with new and new advanced varieties or variations, I think it's very important to actually make sure that these are tested in different geographies. These are tested with different types of farmers. As I said, women farmers, tenant farmers, scheduled caste farmers. I mean, most of Indian farmers are small farmers, so that is usually taken care of. But we must ensure that the woman farmer is also on her field, has grown this variety. Maybe it's already being done. So maybe this is not a suggestion for what needs to be done. But I think that inclusivity is very important in taking it to the farmers' fields.
Yeah, thank you very much. There is another question. It says that probably you have been one of the just a few women in many boardrooms. So how do you ensure that you are heard when there are many other strong personalities in the room?
Okay, that's a good question. I think, as I said, I think it takes time, because I can see that now I speak more than maybe 30 years ago. And many of our academic institutes, and the one I worked in, not my first institution, but second one, is quite gender biased. We have maybe, if we have 50 men professors, we have 5 women professors. So the ratio in any room would be quite different. But I think that, perhaps, I mean, I must admit that for me, I have come from a privilege. I've come from a family where we had a lot of discussion, and we 3 daughters and a mother. So my father used to always say the women have the loudest voice in the house. So I think it starts from childhood, and I had those advantages and privileges of being able to speak freely. And but I think as you work in organizations, it's very important that if you feel that you have a point to make, if you feel that you're in the right, if you feel that your voice is not being heard, you must try and try again, and then slowly the voice is heard. So the situation today is very different from, say, 20 years ago, even in India. So
Thank you. Here we have another one. It says, what would it be your advice to young women, but also young scientists in agriculture science, as researchers who has an ambition to grow to leadership positions?
I think that for all young women, young scientists, the first thing is, commitment to your particular field and demonstrating some work in that field. Because I think we are listened to, young people are listened to if they can show they have done some work. Women are listened to if they can show they have. So I think whatever your discipline, whatever your area, it's very important that first few years of your career is actually working with all seriousness on a particular problem that you have chosen. And I think there are so many different disciplines people have chosen the problem. The other thing I think is communication. And I think this is something important that I've learned over the years, and I wish I had done more of it, is communicate in the media. Communicate, I mean, these Zoom meetings have become very popular only after COVID, but how we're able to exchange our views. So communicate not just within your own discipline, That's very important. You publish your papers, discuss within your scientific groups, but be able to communicate that idea to the larger public. I think that helps give a voice. That helps show that your contribution, your idea has has some relevance to those in the wider world. And I think that that's how you gain leadership, that you're not focused only on your particular problem or your particular concern, but you can take a lesson from there and take it and apply it to another area of work or another institution or organization. So I think communication, I think young people are much better at communicating than us. So I see hope. I think that this is very, very important. Communication is, I think, really key to reflection on your work and then being able to communicate it and make it relevant to a larger audience.
Thank you very much. We have another question. It says, how can AI-driven digital tech be designed and governed so that it reduces rather than deepens existing inequalities among smallholder farmers, especially women?
That's a very tough question. I think it was two scientists from Erie, if I'm not mistaken, who tried to use AI models to look at what it says about women farmers. And it says a lot of good things, but then it leaves out a lot of things as well. So again, I think AI is a tool, and AI is finding, is getting information from what is available. So if women farmers are not counted accurately and that data is not there, how will AI be able to use that data? So I think that in a lot of issues, and we are finding in India that voices and groups that have been excluded or whose experiences are not available in a form that can be searched on the internet, be using these large language models or other models, those voices may be underrepresented, not maybe, are likely to be underrepresented. So AI will definitely have biases. AI is only as good as the material that is there on the web. So I think, again, it's a very important issue when I'm talked about collecting data, having statistics, because that is hard facts. So if we have the right statistics on women workers and it's available, then the AI model can incorporate it. So I think that this is something of concern. And I also think that the question you ask AI is very important. And I think, therefore, for young people, for someone of my age, I have some experience with issues of food security. So if I see an answer on AI, which I feel is not right, I'm able to probe a little further, or I'm able to look up something else, or I'm able to turn to other statistics available to me. So I think asking the right questions, AI is a very, very important tool, and for precision farming and other things. But I think there is still work to be done to make sure that the AI and the findings that we get from it are inclusive and are not leading to further inequalities. I think that is a challenge, and it's work in progress.
Thank you very much. I would like to give the floor back to Dr. Bellu for further questions.
Yeah, Isabel, thank you. But I don't see any more questions. Yeah, I think with that, we would like to thank Professor Madhura Swaminathan. Thanks for your time and your sharing all the experience. Isabel, please.
Yes, thank you, Bellu. Yeah, we have before closing, we would like to ask Professor Swaminathan to give some words of wisdom that we would like to take the audience to take away.
I I know I look old, but am I a wise old woman? I don't think so. Before we go to that, I just wanted to say there was something I wanted to mention earlier, and which is very much a topic which Velu had mentioned in the beginning, and very much a concern for many of us in this region, in South Asia, in West Asia, and that is the geopolitical situation, the war on Iran, the impact on food prices, on fertilizer availability, and therefore on the next crop. So I think there is a very big challenge to food security in the current situation. And we've seen that, as in the experience of Sri Lanka in 2021, from food production collapse because of fertilizer non-availability or fertilizer ban, to food prices, to protests, to riots, and to government change. So we had this whole cycle within a few months, which started actually from a fertilizer shock, if you like. So I'm quite concerned about the current situation in terms of, and I think Bram has also recently, CIMMYT has written a piece on this, that the food and fertilizer price issues is a very big concern. So I would just like to say that for me, economics is the subject that I chose, but to solve the challenges that face us today, the challenge of zero hunger, which I did not think when I started off as a student that, and we've talked about 2030 and zero hunger, that even in 2026, we'll still be talking about 2.6 billion people who cannot afford a healthy diet. And this challenge will require funds, it'll require investment, it'll require public investment in addition to private investment, and it'll require people from different walks of life and different disciplines to work together. So I think it's not a word of wisdom, but I think my plea to the scientists listening is that we have to redouble our efforts. We have to work together. Even though the funding situation I know is difficult, but we have to work even harder to get the monies in order to solve these challenge and to ensure that no one goes to bed hungry.
Thank you very much. So yes, we are so honored to have you here and to hear you, your personal experience, your professional path. And thank you very much, Professor Swaminathan, for this inspiring presentation. On behalf of Dr. Bram Govers, Director General of CIMMYT, we thank Professor Madhura Swaminathan so much for being here today. Also, we appreciate Dr. Velu Govidan for having a great and stimulating conversation. Dr. Govidan, would you like to say a final message?
Yeah, it's our honor again, Professor Madhura Swaminathan, and we are grateful for your time and effort. It is too bit late back in India, but this is kind of a beginning of new week for us. So we will take this forward, and we will work together, and then improve the food and nutrition security issues wherever we can. So with that, many thanks, and thanks to you.
Thank you.
So
It was a
thank you
pleasure.
very much. Thank you.
Bye.
We invite the audience to join the upcoming Catalyst of Change, Advancing Equity and Inclusion in Science seminar. Have a great day. Have a nice evening. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.